white man in my early 40s with red blonde hair and a red beard that's going slightly white on the edges. And I'm wearing a green jumper, and I've got books and scores on shelves behind me. Could I also now invite Esther, Jennifer, and Jane to introduce themselves? This day that we're not going to talk too much about, I promise, in Edinburgh. This open discussion day was run partly by me, but partly by Jennifer, Esther, and Jane, and they can introduce themselves as to what they do. And then I would like to invite the three of you just to give a reflection on the day, perhaps something that you've thought about afterwards, or something that has stuck with you about that day, which might be able to inform the discussion that we're going to have today. Jennifer, would you like to go first?
Hi there. I am Jennifer Williams. Also, I go by J.L. Williams as a poet and librettist. Shall I describe myself visually as well? Is that a good thing to do? That's a good thing to do. White woman, 46, short brown hair, tortoiseshell glasses, red lipstick on, purple and blue layers of clothing, and I'm standing in a room with a kind of grayish wall behind me and a little shelf with lots of crystals on it, because I finally got somewhere to display all my crystals I'd been collecting, which I was quite pleased with. I work during the days as a creative project manager at the Edinburgh Futures Institute, which has only recently come into being at the University of Edinburgh. And I'm also the mother of a 4-year-old and trying to fit being a poet and librettist into and around that, all those busynesses. Freddie, I feel like maybe you asked me to say something else and I'm not sure what the other thing was.
Sorry. Introduce yourselves first, and then we'll ask you again.
Okay,
I think it'll be.
that's me.
Thank you, Esther.
Hello, my name is Esther. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, dramaturg, director, lead artist, choreographer, occasional filmmaker, and I am here to represent Snapelastic. There's 3 of us who run the company together, and we were involved in the event in February. We co-hosted it with Mahogany and Edinburgh Futures Institute. I am a white cis woman in my 30s. I have long blonde hair with a bit of blue at the front. I'm wearing a very cool looking on the screen black Adidas top. And I'm in a new house that I moved into yesterday, so it's a completely bare wall behind me.
Jane.
Hello, I'm Jane McKee, and I work as a senior lecturer in creative writing at the University of Edinburgh. And I was involved in the day as a note taker, the day that we got together. Oh, I should say a little bit more about me. I'm also a poet, and I'm a middle-aged white woman with long darkish hair and a fringe, and I'm wearing a kind of top with pink and purple and like dark green on it, and I'm in a room with bookshelves behind me and a picture. What else? So I've worked with Freddie and Gareth Williams in music before to run short intensive kind of opera courses where we invite some of my creative writing students to collaborate with Gareth's music students to produce mini operas in a week, and Freddie's there as the maestro to kind of oversee the proceedings. And in previous years we have had little sort of showcase rehearsal performances at the end of the week, and so that's my main relationship to opera.
Thank you. before I ask you to give your reflections on the day, or Mark, I should say, has made a lovely little thing, which I'd like to show you all now. As a result of that day, we wrote what we grandly called a manifesto, but it was a series of words that we pulled together by the end. And there was a soundtrack to this text, which is our own performance of paragraph 7 by Cornelius Cardew from The Great Learning. And Jane, as the listener throughout the day, gathered words and created essentially a kind of a poem, which we then plugged into this piece by Cornelius Cardew, which is a kind of collaboratively composed piece which requires no musical score. And I suppose something that was distinctive about the day was that it wasn't, even though it was an open discussion day, it wasn't a kind of sitting around talking day for the whole time. It felt much more like a rehearsal in a way. And that, I think, was a really special way to share and to get to know each other and to discuss these kind of ideas. So that was a taste of what we got up to in Edinburgh on that day. Thanks, Toria, for the little applause. Yeah, could I now ask Jennifer, could you just give one reflection on the day, something that you've been thinking about since or that came out of the day?
Absolutely. I think for me, in a very physical way, what I took away was just how beautiful it was to sing with other people, because I don't actually do that a lot in my day-to-day life. And it was so beautiful. We did it quite a lot in different ways throughout the day to be just, it felt like sort of swimming in other people's sound and together with other people in sound. And I feel like there's so much talk of how we reconnect, how we're able to be in communion with one another in this very in many ways fragmented and fractured world that we've created for ourselves. And it was deeply connecting to be vibrating, to feel those vibrations from other people going into my body, and to be touching other people in that way. And this idea that you could have a physical experience with another person without having to physically touch them, was very, very beautiful.
Thank you. Esther.
There was an exercise, I promise it will be very short, my description. It was an exercise that Jennifer led, where we were invited to imagine the future in 20 years, 50 years. I'm making this up, maybe it wasn't 20, but there were 3 sets of imagination exercises, and then we would share what we came up with a partner. And I personally felt that as we were doing the sharing with the partner, I just realized that I'm just so negative and I don't want to be like that. And I kind of just decided to be more positive. And it was interesting that that was like a recurring theme when we shared as a group. And I have been thinking about that since, how just like the choice of, I guess, deciding to be active and positive, I guess just making that choice, how powerful that felt. I think that was a great highlight for me.
Thank you. Jane, where are you? I can't see.
I'm here. I'm here. All of those things, actually, when Jennifer was talking, I was going to talk about how powerful singing together was, because it's something that I actually don't do at all very much. I mean, even singing out loud to myself, only in sort of very private moments. So sharing that with people, and also singing whilst moving was quite enlightening. I mean, I really loved it. I loved the freedom of moving and singing and not being self-conscious and being with others and having your voice sort of join the communal voice, which for somebody who doesn't feel confident about their singing was very liberating. So I loved that. I was struck, we were thinking about the future. I mean, that was one of the purposes of the day, to kind of collectively imagine futures. And actually the level of anxiety that people felt about the future, I guess I wasn't surprised by it, but I think one of the lovely things about the day, and that does really play into what Esther was saying, was that actually being able to articulate some of your fears with others in a kind of structured way and share them, felt also a kind of like an unburdening and a sort of liberation. And I think that kind of gave people the confidence to begin to think tentatively about more positive, kind of visions as well together. So there was a real feeling of solidarity. And this isn't just one reflection, I'm so sorry, but the other thing that I found really powerful from the day, Snap Elastic offered an exercise where you didn't really have time. You had to divide a big sheet of paper into like quadrants. I think there were 20 boxes, and you had to, in a very short amount of time, come up with all the projects you wanted to work on. And so it was a real unlocking of creativity, because you had to try and aim to fill every box, and you had to do it quickly. So that was really useful. And then we did it again, and this I found even more interesting. We were invited to do the same thing, but to imagine that we were looking back on our lives and kind of list the 20 things that we were most proud of. And that, if you're somebody like me who kind of struggles to articulate what you want, that was really illuminating, because I came up with things that I never would have imagined that I would have come up with, kind of wanting to be proud of that. Looking back retrospectively, it seemed to give me kind of a permission that when I'm here looking forward, I don't really have, but looking back kind of gave me a different kind of permission. So that was really interesting as well. Yeah, that'll probably do, because I think I said about 3. So
Yeah, and one thing that seemed to come out very strongly from the day was this idea, in our sort of publicity around this meeting, we talked about radical kindness and asking what radical kindness was. Actually, in our manifesto of that day, the phrase that came up was radical gentleness, which was interesting. And there is, of course, the concept of radical care as well. I was wondering if anyone wants to talk about what they think radical kindness or radical gentleness is, and specifically how it could be applied within the context with which we all work. Jennifer.
Yeah, is it useful for me to kick that off? I've been trying to think about it this afternoon a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, I very sadly missed the very end of the day, so I feel like maybe part of this discussion happened when I was in there. So if I'm saying things that, yeah, please feel free to add to and educate me further about these things. I did a little bit of quick Googling just to do some exploration as well. And I think interestingly, I mean, all these things come up around radical kindness. Funnily enough, I was looking at in podcasts, and many churches had podcasts about radical kindness, which I thought was kind of interesting. Radical care brought up a little bit more around things like arts councils trying to provide money to explore what that might look like. As far as I could tell, just trying to get a handle on maybe a kind of definition of some of these things. I felt like radical kindness was maybe coming up more along the lines of how can we be really kind to one another, even to people we don't necessarily like, or in circumstances that are quite challenging. Radical care, maybe more about literally like all the inequalities in caring that make it really challenging for people. So who's doing the caring? Many women, many people of color are often having to do a lot of this work, not being paid or not being paid properly for it. So there's a lot of, I think, real inequality, and I think it interferes a lot with people being able to participate in ways they might otherwise like to in their professions, in their art making. Radical gentleness, some of the things that came up that I thought were interesting were really around how we treat ourselves. So how, you know, that we're often very self-critical, we're often very negative, as Esther kind of touched on, without even realizing. And, you know, are there ways to literally be more gentle with ourselves? So I think, funnily enough, all these phrases, all these words, they could be very almost interchangeable in different ways, but I thought that was kind of interesting ways of differentiating them to some extent. But just some of the things I thought about in terms of, you know, as art practitioners, as opera makers, as theater makers, as people with some kind of platform, you know, there's both the way we have a chance to represent things on stages. So that's an interesting question. Are these things we want to incorporate into what we're representing, and how do we do that? There's also the more practitioner side of it. Like, how do we incorporate these things into our practice to radically care for, be kind to, be gentle on ourselves and those also around us who are working under often very straitened and challenging circumstances. I think there's a lot to say about our structures, our social structures, our funding structures, our we talked a little bit about this on the day. I think Mahogany is very interested in ritual at the moment, and there's a sense, I think, in our societies of ritual and communalness, community, you know, breakdown in so many ways, or a loss of some way that we gather and connect with one another. So it feels like this kind of art making is certainly a potential path to follow, to I mean, it's still a way that people come together and, you know, sit around the fire and listen to the beating of the drum. So there's something there, I think, that we can really celebrate and explore in ways that, you know, for instance, in certainly my experience of growing up or living in Britain for a long time is like most of the people I know are not going to most of the people I know are not going to church. They're not going to local community meetings. So that, you know, but people I know do go and sit in the theater together. So there's something, you know, it's something communal that's happening. And I think in some of my practice working as I do at this new part of the university, it's called the Edinburgh Futures Institute. They're saying, you know, all the things they're saying about it is it's meant to be this groundbreaking new part of the university where we do things differently. It's interdisciplinary, it's hybrid, it's fusion, it's trying to bring together you know, researchers and students and the community to think about some of the wicked problems we face and how we can make real change happen in the world. But as usual, with these big, great plans and goals, it's like, but how do we do things every day in a way that is supportive and kind and caring to the people with very good intentions trying to do that work? And it's so easy to fall back on or find oneself entangled in very traditional hierarchical structures, bureaucratic ways of working. And even if you have intentions not to work that way, because you have to work with other people who are in those structures, it's so hard to push against, you know, but I don't know how we can, yeah, I'll try and say it in a positive way. I think there's so much to be gained from trying to do things differently. And I think often like that can look like really like both in terms of your personal life, your personal day, start small, think about your family, your colleagues, the people you see every day. Like, how do you make little changes that make things really, really more beautiful for your everyday experience? And you know, I think there's so much about, oh, you know, can you squeeze in 5 minutes of meditation? Can you do 2 minutes of yoga? Can you squeeze in all this stuff? And you know, I struggle so much with it. Like, it's like there are all these great things that I know would help me, but how do I fit it in, like in amongst all the things I have to do to feed my child and pay my mortgage? And but but I really think like it you know, Esther said something again that stuck with me on the day, like there's only so much time, you know, what do you do with your time? And it's just, it chimed with something I've been thinking about a lot. Like, we decide, like sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but we decide what our priorities are. We decide what we're spending our time on. And I mean, not everyone has so much freedom depending on their jobs, their roles, but like I would argue that we still, you know, that's what we need to work towards, is being able to decide to do things in healthy, kind, caring, beautiful ways. And one of the projects I work on is called Utopia Lab. That's what I shared on this day. And something I've been thinking about a lot with Utopia Lab is that it's in some ways just about slowing down and bringing some stillness into the world. And like that feels actually really radical to me right now. Like the idea of slowing down, of doing less, feels like this hugely radical anti-capitalist kind of thing to do. And it's very hard to think about it because part of me thinks, oh my God, the world's on fire. This is not a time to slow down. This is a time to, you know, throw myself in front of a tank, or, you know, I don't know, like, you know, recycle 1,000 bottles, or, you know, there must be things I could do that would help. But I think it's like, I want to do all those things, but I think we all need to kind of like slow down a little and think about what's going on and what we're doing that's contributing to all this kind of madness. And then start having conversations and making from that point. And to me, like there's something radically radical and kind and gentle about thinking of ways we can slow down and then start talking and thinking about what we want the world to be, not from this place of manic overwhelm. I feel like I've been talking for a long time, so I'm going to stop now and let other people kind of reflect.
No, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, it does seem like what makes the gentleness or the kindness or the care radical is when you're trying to do it within a system that doesn't allow for it, that dehumanizes you, or that doesn't think about you as a fully rounded human being, is treating you more like a cog in the machine. Does anyone, can I open it up to anyone? Does anyone have either a strong idea of what they think radical kindness is, or an example of where they've had to be radical with their kindness, where they've had to, in order to bring a gentleness or a kindness into their work, into their practice, they've had to be radical. Anybody? Victoria.
Hello. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm a blonde white woman. It's dyed, but it's blonde. In my early 40s, against a white wall, I'm wearing a big orange paisley scarf and a denim shirt. I jotted down a couple of things during that might be useful, but if they're not, jump in. One is when thinking about radical gentleness, I thought about why I reacted slightly against it, because I think I am quite a gentle person, but there's a bit of me that was like, oh, and I think that what I thought was interesting there is there's a tension between a drive that I know that lots of us will have in terms of feeling that we want to kind of individually express things, that there is a kind of individual artistic drive, but that also that we might want to make work that we felt had words that we might use around our work include things like kind of force and power and challenge and I think it's maybe that the radicalness of the gentleness comes in being able to live with both of those things and being able to apply the gentleness in situations where we're kind of holding on to our desire to challenge and dismantle and scream and set fire to things, both literally and metaphorically, and you know, smash things with baseball bats. You know, that those things need to live together, and that there's a challenge in that, because we can't, as theatre makers, I know that we're not necessarily interested in just representing good people being good all the time. You know, that there is something else there, and that absolutely isn't an excuse for being a dickhead ever. Like, absolutely not. But that there is but in knowing that it's never an excuse for being a dickhead, that there is a kind of challenge in reconciling the two. Like a constant challenge, not like a solvable challenge, like a thing that we need to kind of constantly live with. And the other was just when it was being talked about, like, where these phrases come up. I would say that kind of radical care is the one that I'm most familiar with, because it comes up a lot in the disabled community. And I don't want to kind of talk about that for ages, and I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but like, I think there's one of the ways in that comes up is that it's an embrace of interdependence, and not of independence. And there's a radicalness in not in the acceptance of the need for care as a kind of universal and positive thing, and therefore not in dividing the world into people who need care and people who give care either reluctantly or generously, and reluctance and generosity become irrelevant concepts around the giving of the care. And I think that it's often come with that force, because both that either the reluctance or the sense of generosity do something to the care that makes it less valuable. So I'm not sure that's very well articulated, but that's sort of what I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautifully articulated. I saw Craig turning on your video, and I just wondered if that meant that you wanted to say something, because I know that the phrase radical gentleness, I think, came out of your group when they were gathering manifesto. Is that right, Craig?
I don't know if it was our group, but I did want to say something about it, because I think we're discussing how we can be radically gentle or radically kind and over to others. And I think that's important, but I think as artists as well, there's an importance in being radically kind to ourselves. I think there's a tendency for artists to generally be very self-critical and dislike themselves and hate themselves to take very extreme measures. And I think there's always got to be like a step back to kind of like make sure you're like being kind and being good to yourself. So I guess it's the worry of coming across egotistical there, but I think there still needs to be something where we're, you know, focusing and making sure that we're also healthy and happy and okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone else? We should probably take. Mark, will you tell me when we need to take a break? But does anyone else want to? I'm assuming that when people turn their videos on, they might want to speak. I've just seen Jen turn their camera on. Would you like to say something, Jen?
Thank you. There's a reaction that I had to that initial mentioning of radical care and radical kindness that I had to sort of sit with for a moment, because I think it was a complex kind of antipathy towards the phrase that I think comes out of having been in environments where I'm being told that radical care and radical kindness are being practiced, but never being asked if that's what is being felt. And I think there's something really interesting about when we're applying these things, remaining open to the possibility that what works for one person doesn't work for another, and that possibly what the pressure is within a group situation where radical kindness is the aim, to say that you've received radical kindness even if it's not actually what you feel. There's something about the complexity of that, and I think a lot about the relationship with audience and how that pressure, how that peer pressure, that group pressure can work, and how it can shut down the possibility for people to say how they perceived the treatment that they were given in a given situation. And that idea that, sorry, I'm articulating this terribly because it is a brand new thought that I've not sat with for long enough. I'm interested in what Craig said about the relationship with ego, and I think that's probably at the heart of what this thought is, that in managing our own egos in relation to the radicalness of the kindness, can we create space for our kindness to be criticized for where it is not as kind as we intend? And again, I think also coming from a disability background, this is something that the lack of a one size fits all is a massive concern, something I spend a lot of time thinking about and trying to figure out sort of where people's kindness clashes are, where people do or don't feel that their needs are being met. And I'm interested in knowing, like, with regards to the day that you're describing, what were the feedback processes like? Like, I know this is part of those feedback processes, but what were they like? How are things being articulated in your case? And were there any things where you feel like possibly you would have benefited from a different form of kindness, or where kindness level could be tweaked in direct relation to yourself? Does that question make sense?
It does.
Hopefully, some amount of sense.
It does. Whether I or anyone can answer it very quickly, I'm not sure, because we are. I mean, this, as you say, we are in the process of evaluating that day. This is part of it. I don't know about anyone else. I haven't thought about the kind of the level or the depth of kindness. Just the fact that it was there and it was being talked about, and it was a kind of a leading part of the day. For me, felt good and enough to an extent. but I suppose this is a new concept, certainly for me, and I think for Mahogany to an extent. And this is why I'm interested in asking this question, because I'm personally interested to find out what people's perspectives are on this topic, and how we can better articulate what it is, and how it can manifest. So yeah, sorry, that's not really an answer, but it's. Does anyone else from the day? Jennifer, would you like to?
Just because it's the most traditional and perhaps the least useful, but just to say, in terms of what some actual feedback gathering we did following the day, we did send out a kind of more traditional type of a feedback form where we asked questions like, well, what did you like about the day? What could we have done better? Any other thoughts? So trying to keep it short but open enough that if people did have kind of any thoughts on many of these issues that we'd raised and tried to engage with throughout the day, that there was an easy forum for them to share those thoughts. We didn't get quite as many responses as I would have liked. I know people are so busy, and the last thing they need is like another form to fill out. So I do I'm very interested. Ava, I think I saw in your bio that you're doing a PhD on evaluation, which made me think, oh, I'd be very curious to talk to you and hear more about what you're learning about. But I think Jen, part of your question, I think what's interesting to me as someone running events and doing things but interested in these ideas is like, how do we make them better, and how do we how do we hear what people want in ways, that allow us to be most responsive?
I think possibly sorry, just to respond to that, Jennifer, I think possibly I'm interested in how one sets up feedback processes that allow the person feeding back to be critical while also kind at the same time. And I think that's something that a lot of people really struggle with, the idea that there may be things where we need to say, this could change, that could change, this didn't work, but the feeling of putting this didn't work on a form is really sticky. And I wonder, I don't have an answer to what other shapes there are for that kind of feedback, but I'm curious about it.
Thank you. I was going to jump away slightly from radical kindness, though, so I hope you don't mind, Tori, if we don't carry on with that. What I would like to do is think about the future, and think about perhaps also what Esther was talking about in terms of kind of making positive choices. And I would like to take a couple of minutes now to ask you to do a little guided visualization. So if you'd like to make yourself comfortable, you're sitting nice and comfortable, and just take a moment to concentrate on your own breath, and close your eyes if you like. You can turn your screen off if you feel more comfortable. Just take a couple of really nice deep breaths. Focus on your breath. And now just imagine that you're waking up in the morning, and it's a fantastic day. You feel amazing. You get up, you get dressed, you put on your favorite clothes, and you feel fabulous. Everything is wonderful. Go into the kitchen, you start making breakfast, you start eating your breakfast. It's the most delicious breakfast you've ever had in your whole life. It's just amazing. It's great. And as you're munching away at this most incredible breakfast, you suddenly realize that today is the perfect day. It's the day where everything clicks. Everything is wonderful. Everything is beautiful. So as you make your way now to your studio, to your rehearsal room, to your theatre, to your concert hall, to your practice room, wherever it is that you are creative, and where you make your work. What is it about your practice on this day? What is it about yourself on this day? What is it about the environment around you on this perfect day that is different? to a normal day? Just take a moment to think about what that might be. Write it down if you like. Just give you a couple more minutes to have a think and write anything down that you'd like. And now thinking about that thing, I hope I've given everyone enough time to do that. But you can keep thinking. But thinking about that thing, what are the concrete actions that you can take, that we can all take, in order to make that thing that only happens on a perfect day? How can we make it happen every day? And I'm going to ask Esther to say something about this while the rest of you are considering this question. Esther.
Thank you for asking. I'm going to tell you what was amazing about my perfect day, apart from the weather and things like that, that obviously I cannot control, only on better days. And I think what a clear thing is that things were easy, things were happening, people were saying yes. And I think that in many ways that could be like, my first thought was, well, that's kind of a cop out, because you're giving external forces the say whether your day is perfect or not perfect. But I guess I have had days like that before, that have been perfect, and sometimes obviously that has to do with, I think, external forces, and sometimes I don't think so much, obviously, and it's not all down to me either. So I don't think I can make every day the perfect day either. But I think that there was something about what I was thinking, that even if I just knowing that what is a perfect day for me, I guess, kind of already contributes to me getting closer to this perfect day, because of the choices that I make as a result of knowing where I'm, what kind of day I would like to have. And also thinking that for me, what a big, that was such a clear thing to articulate, that had to do with things happening and people saying yes. I guess that is that can be reversed. So I guess that also means I'm asking, so that people can say yes. I think that was one thing. The other thing was kind of imagining that I am also the external people in somebody else's imagination. So when people ask me if I can, I could say yes. And obviously that doesn't mean always say yes to everything, but having that as a little guiding star or something. And the other thing that kind of came up after the things were happening and people were saying yes, was just the sense that there was enough time. And so when it's the end of the day, you feel like what you've done, you're satisfied with. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you've finished something or that you've, jumped that goalpost, or do you jump a goalpost? Anyway, you know what I mean? And so I think that kind of, again, in a much smaller way, it does really, like, I know what I'm talking about when I when I feel like that day was perfect because there was enough time, because in smaller ways, I have had lots of perfect days and I have lots of days that haven't been perfect. And I think, and I think probably we all know, or at some point we have all known, and we will all know again, when a day feels like it's been a good, perfect day and you've done enough for yourself and you're satisfied with the result. So those are two quite clear things. That was good. I'll take them away with me, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Jane, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think for me, a sort of a perfect day would be, it would have balance in it between having some quiet, sort of reflective time that is a little bit more internal, and that may or may not involve writing. That doesn't happen very often given the pace of life, so I absolutely appreciate what you're saying about time, Esther. That's an essential ingredient as well, I think. And also, sorry, my dog wants to. And also, I'd like to do something collaboratively with that I'm excited about, and that could be a creative thing. It could be a performance potentially with people that I love and trust. And yeah, that would be a perfect day. And for it to be, if it was in front of an audience, to have the sense that it went well would be good. That would be like the cherry on the cake. So yeah, but it would be a mix. I think I need to have a mix of the mix of the doing collaborative things with people that I love and trust, and that could be colleagues or it could be friends, or it could be but also having some time that isn't all about making and doing, that is a little bit less rushed and less pressured, that allows for reflection as well. So it's a balance.
Great, thank you. Would anyone else like to say anything? I can see Leslie. I'm picking on people who've got their videos. Would you like to say anything, Lee? No. You're on mute. Does that mean you don't want to say anything? You would or what? I can't hear you because you're on mute. You would like to say something. There you
Sorry.
are.
Sorry, it's a while since I've been using Zoom. So and on this little device. Yeah, I thought those were lovely descriptions of a perfect day. I really enjoyed, just in a sense, because we're on Zoom, trying to collectively come together and breathe at the same time again. And I enjoy hearing, it was a bit strange, to be honest, hearing the recording of the sound that we all made, because in some ways it left a feeling rather than a sound. And I think the perfect day is about a feeling, because if we feel that the day is going well or it's a much nicer day, it's not necessarily because it's good weather, but because we feel happier inside, we feel more at peace. And no matter what the circumstances are in that day or the interruptions that come along, we can actually make a conscious effort to accept what's happening and look for opportunities within whatever those interruptions might be. So I think when I was thinking about the perfect day, I was trying to sort of go through in my mind what the feelings would be in that perfect day, and that the quietness in the morning, getting up early and hearing the birds singing would be the start for me, because there's something very natural outside that doesn't involve other people, but it just involves being there. And I think that links with something that when we were doing our manifesto, I felt like we had to step into something in order for that final place in the sort of time scale to be a place that was something beautiful. And I still think about that a lot. But I feel like it's actually partly what you're saying just now about you need to step into a new day. Each day is a new day with new beginnings, new hopes, new dreams, whatever they are. And a little bit what I was thinking as well was, instead of being, in a sense, people who are competitive first and foremost, but we're actually more collaborative, which is what that lady just said. And I just sensed that when you asked us all to breathe and just sit, whether our eyes are closed or whatever, we are the group that's on the Zoom right now. And that sort of stepping into that place or realm, wherever that is a sense that no matter where we are located right now, we're connected because we're breathing at the same time. And we're breathing that air, we're breathing in our own homes or our own wherever we are. And we're trying to reach out to connect with each other right now. And I find that whole new sound idea so exciting, because it's very much more or less, I'm trying to get this job, or I'm auditioning for this, or I've just been made redundant, and what am I going to do next? Less worry. A perfect day to me would be a day where worry is eliminated from pretty much everybody's lives. And much more of a sense of peace.
Thank you very much. And what are the concrete actions that we can make? I mean, how can we create world peace? I'm not going to ask that question, but would anyone else like to share both their perfect day and or what they feel a concrete action could be in order to achieve that, to manifest that? Victoria.
Hello. Again, sorry, I'll try not to talk too much. I know you've had quite a lot of me already. I just the things that I noted down, some of which other people have kind of talked about, are both very banal and then also quite creatively specific. So immediately when you talked about getting up in the morning, I'm like, okay, I have ME and like chronic pain. So for me, that has to happen like 9:30 earliest. Whatever this is that you want me to leave the house for, that's starting at 11:30. Like, and then I think before that, the day is already like not perfect. I can kind of sort of manage it, but I won't have had breakfast and I won't have enjoyed it because I won't have felt able to eat it yet and all of that. So in order to fit in my excellent like rye bread and marmalade, we're already like well into the day. And then I realized that the perfect thing that I really wanted, the thing that I imagined arriving at, was something where I was bringing something that I'd worked on alone into a larger group, whether that was the first day of rehearsals or like a big collaborative meeting or a workshop. And I realized what I really, really want is to have my work like challenged and like really dug into by people who I know aren't trying to undermine me. Like, and for that to happen in an atmosphere where I know so entirely that people aren't coming from a place of wanting me to feel bad, that I can get better because I can take feedback and I can take yes but, and I can take where my ideas clash with and meet other people's ideas, and there's no kind of interpersonal kind of ick to get in the way of that. So those were the things that I really wanted. So I guess the concrete steps are accessible rehearsal schedules, like number one, and the second one is harder because you can't fake it. There's no like, oh, well, you'll create the atmosphere where nobody feels undermined by like everybody not wanting to undermine anyone. Like, it's not like I don't know that there's a shortcut other than just not being like that.
Well, it's quite
That's all I've got.
Yeah, no, but it's great. No, but that second one is really about, how do you create an environment around you in which others can be supportive of you. Andrew, you've just turned on your video. Does that mean you'd like to say something?
It doesn't really, no. I'm still trying to get out of bed. Yeah, it was really interesting to hear what you were saying, Victoria, because I have a similar sort of struggle, which shifts the day quite a long way in advance. The other thing was just trying to get my head around notions like perfect day, and it's almost impossible to imagine. But yeah, you can have a day that's fulfilling and worthwhile and astonishing and all of those things that might not be a perfect day. You might end up with that when you finally get back to bed, which is another story completely. You feel that the day has been worth slowly crawling out of bed in the morning. So yeah, and again, that's my problem, wrestling with those sort of intellectual negative arguments, just to get almost anything done. But yeah, I'll see if I can get around to my breakfast now.
Can you say anything, Andrew, about any kind of concrete actions that you make personally, or within your organisation, to kind of mitigate against the kind of concern?
I mean, certainly within our organisation, and for those that don't know, we're a new music and sound arts organisation that work a lot with artists and often young artists. And for a long time, we've tried to find ways. Again, this is. I was interested. I can't remember now who said we can get rid of the radical in front of kind and gentle. We're an organisation that, because of the way we started and the people who started it, have always tried to be kind, gentle, thoughtful. So we've always gone out of our way to ask artists and audiences, what do you need? What is it you need? And then try to fulfil that. And it's a difficult thing to fully achieve, because often there's contradictions in place that you have to try and deal with. But again, by being kind, thoughtful, taking time, listening, all those, really quite simple things, well, on the face of it, simple things, you can allow things to happen in a way that everyone can feel valued. We talk about I think I mentioned in the comments at the beginning, we redeveloped the old park keeper's house in the middle of Victorian Park in Barrow, and we put an extension on that's a performance space, but the building is still a family home. I mean, that's what that's the design of it, is a family home, and we try and hold on to that feeling of welcoming artists and audiences into your family home, and to make all the necessary adjustments so that people feel welcome and cared for, and that includes the people who work there. This is sounding like we're a right bunch of hippies, and we're far from that. But there's something about the day-to-day way we interact with each other, and some of that can be, if you do it often enough, it becomes almost habitual, and you don't have to think about quite how you're doing that. You just do it because the culture's changed. And I think we've been going for 15 years now, and there's something about culture change in organizations of whatever scale that is the thing that needs to happen, and it feels like that's done by incremental change and personal change, and people having the courage to step aside a little bit and to do the unexpected in a way. The sort of thing we all do as artists. We all know that doing the unexpected is a really good way of slightly off-putting an audience in a way that then it allows them to feel something and change how they think and how they feel. Yeah, sorry, I'm rambling now. I've had a long day. We've been interviewing for a new post. So I've had 8 hours of interviewing. So it's been a long, and I'm really glad I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I'm really glad I got invited. I've met Freddie once and had a really long and very fast conversation because we're trying to fit it in. And it's been, I wish I was at the event in Edinburgh because it sounds bloody great. And we don't do that from what I can gather. I mean, maybe you do it a lot. We don't do it enough as a sector. We don't do these things enough. The visualization was a glorious thing to do. And normally, you know, I sometimes feel a bit uncomfortable when I do those things, which is why I switched my video off. But that sense that we were all somehow for that moment all together in another space rather than this strange one we're all staring at each other was an absolute delight and should be part of what we do, I think. I'll shut up now. It's great to see everyone.
Thank you, Andrew. It's great. Yeah, well, it sounds like we don't need the radical. We just need organizations like Full of Noises, and if I may say, Mahogany, and I'm sure many other organizations that you all work for, like Snap Elastic and EFI. And it feels like I've been pushing for this, like, so what are we going to do? What's our kind of political activism? How are we going to change this? And actually, we don't need that by the sounds of things. We just need to be who we are and do what we believe in and behave in a way that that serves our needs and our desires and bring those people with us who also want to be part of that. Esther, would you like to say something?
Just wanted to come in a little bit on that note of, you know, of the concrete action. And I think that linking it back a little bit to the conversation about, I guess, not radical care or radical gentleness, mostly maybe radical gentleness, is that I think, and it kind of, this also links back to what Andrew was saying about incremental and personal change. I think it's, I feel anyway that, you know, I have my own way of doing things, and I don't think there should be one or two or I don't know how many ways of doing things. And I think that one of the good things about even just talking, like you said, Freddie, about, or like kindness and gentleness being in the discourse, I think one of the good things about that is that we think about it, and we, by thinking about it, we practice it at the same time, and we practice it with relation to ourselves as well. And so I think and it comes back again to being satisfied with what we're doing, I think. So if we are trying in the ways that we can, and through having practiced radical gentleness, we are not hard on ourselves to try and do it differently or doing it more, or I don't know, then I think, for me anyway, it feels like that sense of satisfaction can be achieved, that you feel like you are doing something that is what you can do, and that might be for some people to jump in front of a tank, and for other people to have time for their breakfast, and to feel confident asking for those things without feeling like that's an ego thing, or without like questioning ourselves. I think it's a really good thing that I think I've learned from actually just a little thing, a lot about from working with Snap Elastic, or in that context where, again, just a little link back to the radical kindness. I think one of the things in which we've approached this is, and again, this responds a little bit to what you were saying, Tori, about, you don't want to be radically gentle, you want to be like, and I think that one might, not necessarily you, but one might want that as an artist. I think to kind of think about our work not just as the output that comes out, but how we do that thing. And sometimes prioritizing the way we do something, even they're becoming even more important than what we do, in a way.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm conscious of the fact that we've got to 7:30, and that's the kind of advertised ending of this event. So we should probably just take a moment to say goodbye. But and thank you all very much again for coming. And it was a wonderful evening, very fruitful, and it was wonderful for me personally to reflect on what was a really great day in Edinburgh and some really wonderful further reflections tonight.